Next up, we're going to hear from Representative Susan Donovan, who is both the sponsor of the Fair Pay Act in the House and also someone who has an amazing and kind of scary story of her own to share.
Did you recognize Deborah Giro?
Oh, I didn't.
Oh, I'd also like to recognize Representative Deborah Giro, who just came in. She is also one of the co-sponsors of this bill. So I'm going to put my glasses on. So thank you so much for coming here to support the fight for 15 and fair pay, and for sharing your stories. I too have a story to share. At 22 years old, I was a first-year teacher and girls field hockey coach in a small rural New England community. My male colleague, also a first-year teacher, was the boys' soccer coach. He made exactly double the pay I did for basically the same job. We had the same practice schedule, the same game schedule, and the same experience. I was told that my work was worth less because boys' sporting events were better attended and therefore more important than the girls. The sting of that discrimination is still with me 42 years later as I stand here. Women have entered the workforce in ever-increasing numbers over the past generations. The latest reports state that women comprise 47% of the labor force here in the United States. They have successfully entered many previously male-dominated professions, bringing their skills and experiences with them. Along with women, other minority groups have successfully entered the labor force, adding diversity to our workplaces. But despite this progress, what hasn't changed is the gap in wages that still exists between men and women, and especially women of color. The wage gap has serious lifelong effects on women and the families that their wages support. It is 2018, and on average, Rhode Island working women each lose more than $7,000 per year to the wage gap. Think about that. The consequences of lower wages also affect a person's retirement income, the very income needed to enjoy economic security as we age. The wage gap exists across all industries, all occupations, and all education levels. Even women with master's degree are paid 72 cents less than men for the same work and the same education. When all other differences are factored in, differences in experience, education, region, and union membership, researchers conclude that discrimination and unconscious bias continue to affect wages. These lost wages mean women and their families have less money to support themselves, save and invest for the future, and spend on goods and services. Families, businesses, and the economy suffer because of this lost income. Fortunately, there are policies that would help, like passing the Fair Pay Act. This bill helps to close the wage gap by clarifying and strengthening existing equal pay protections and by eliminating practices that perpetuate the wage gap. It prohibits employers from paying workers differently, including by sex, race, or other protected class. This measure makes it illegal to pay workers less than their white male colleagues without a clearly documented difference in skill. The Fair Pay Act clarifies comparable work, making it clear that workers need to be paid equally for substantially similar work, even if every detail is not the same. Our legislation bans policies that prevent workers from discussing their pay with each other. Women, people of color, and other classes protected by this bill usually find out about pay discrimination only by learning how much coworkers make, as I did. This legislation removes past salary history as a consideration, since discrimination is perpetuated over time by employers relying on past salaries rather than skills to determine current pay. The Fair Pay Act requires the employer to disclose the salary range for a position. Often women and people of color make less than they should because they do not know that others in their job are making more, so they don't ask for more. The argument that implementing pay equity legislation is not necessary and will harm the economy is false. What harms the economy and penalizes families, according to the Economic Opportunity Employment Commission, is the systematic underpayment of some people because of their sex, race, or ethnicity. When wages are raised, purchasing power increases, strengthening the economy. A growing number of businesses support the elimination of wage discrimination between different jobs as good business practice, and that pay equity is consistent with remaining competitive. Despite the existing Equal Pay Act, wage discrimination laws are poorly enforced and cases are extremely difficult to prove and win. Stronger legislation such as the Fair Pay Act is needed to ease the burden of filing claims and clarify the right to pay equity. Women work just as hard as men to advance careers and to support their families. If we are serious about economic equality for women and people of color and supporting working families, we need to address the practices that continue to allow employers to discriminate against employees and perpetuate the wage gap. Let's do this.